Michael and Linda Starbuck, along with their 3 children, Daniel, Emily, and Sophie, were known as the picture-perfect family. But in February 2006, the world discovered a horrifying truth. The family that seemed to have it all was found brutally murdered inside their own home. What happened behind the walls of the Starbuck residence that night would not only destroy a family but shock the entire world. Michael and Linda Starbuck were the kind of couple people pointed to when they spoke about success, stability, and love. He was an architect whose name appeared on several of Greenwood's most admired buildings. She was a school counselor, remembered for her warmth and her way of listening to children who felt unheard. Together, they raised 3 children: Daniel, the teenager who excelled in soccer; Emily, who loved playing the piano; and Sophie, the youngest, whose energy filled every room she entered. To neighbors, the Starbucks seemed almost untouchable in their perfection. They hosted summer barbecues, helped decorate the neighborhood during holidays, and were the kind of family people secretly compared themselves to and wished they could be more like. But in every story of perfection, there are cracks. And with the Starbuck family, those cracks were small enough at first to be ignored, then wide enough that the people closest to them wondered how they had missed them all along. Michael was ambitious, sometimes too ambitious. He took on risky projects that left him stretched thin financially, though few outside his circle knew the full extent of his troubles. He had a habit of solving problems quietly, covering gaps with loans, paperwork, or favors he never mentioned at home. Linda, on the other hand, began noticing changes. She confided in a friend that Michael seemed distracted, spending long hours away and avoiding questions about bills and finances. She didn't know that he had taken out not one, but several life insurance policies, each carefully worded, each quietly filed away. Think about this for a moment. Why would a man with a healthy family, a good career, and a reputation to protect need multiple life insurance policies? Was he trying to protect his family in case of failure, or was he building a safety net for something else entirely? Comment below and let us know what you think, because even investigators would later struggle with this question. On the surface, life in the Starbuck home went on as normal. Daniel went to soccer practice, Emily practiced her piano lessons, Sophie spent afternoons chasing the family dog in the backyard. Neighbors described seeing Linda gardening on weekends, waving as they walked past. They were, in every visible way, the family next door that reminded others of everything good about small-town life. And yet, inside the Starbuck house, there were arguments whispered behind closed doors. Linda had confronted Michael about bank statements she didn't understand, about why he had been acting distant, about the way money seemed to vanish faster than it came in. Michael always had an answer, though never one that fully explained what she saw. This tension built quietly, unnoticed by almost everyone else. That is often how the darkest stories begin, not with sudden explosions, but with small pieces quietly falling out of place. Linda had started journaling during this time, writing down her thoughts late at night after the children had gone to bed. Those journals, later discovered by investigators, showed a woman unsure if her marriage was stable or if she even knew her husband as well as she thought she did. She worried about the future, about the debts she suspected, and about the way Michael had become unpredictable in his moods. And then came February of 2006. A month that would strip away the illusion of safety forever. The night was cold, sharp, with the kind of air that keeps people indoors. A few neighbors mentioned hearing noises around midnight, though at the time no one thought much of it. The next morning, calls began to circulate when the Starbucks did not answer their phone, and their cars remained parked in the driveway untouched. One neighbor recalled knocking on their door, only to walk away unsettled when no one answered. By afternoon, police had been called to perform a welfare check. What they would walk into would change not only the neighborhood, but the way the entire country saw this family. Before we continue, ask yourself this: if everything appeared perfect from the outside, how could a nightmare of such magnitude take root inside? And more importantly, how does a family admired by all become the center of one of the most shocking murder cases in history? Stick with us as we uncover the disturbing details, and if you haven't already, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. There are twists in this story you will not see coming, and you won't want to miss them. The Starbuck family murder would soon become more than just another headline. It would be remembered as a case that shattered trust, revealed hidden betrayals, and left investigators, neighbors, and viewers around the world asking the same haunting question: what really happened behind closed doors in the Starbuck household? When officers entered the Starbuck home that cold February day, they were met with a silence so heavy it was almost unbearable. The air inside felt unnatural, thick with a sense of wrongness. The first thing they noticed was the stillness. No sound of children playing, no footsteps echoing down the hallway, no barking from the family dog. It was as though life itself had been drained from the house. What they found behind those walls would soon make headlines across the nation. Each member of the Starbuck family had been killed with a single gunshot wound to the head. The precision was chilling. Daniel was found slumped over his desk, textbooks scattered around him as if he had been studying. Emily lay near the piano in the living room, her hands frozen in the posture of practice. Sophie was found in her bed, clutching the stuffed rabbit she always slept with. Linda was discovered in the hallway, and Michael in the master bedroom. It was a scene that even seasoned detectives struggled to process. No one could comprehend how a family so admired could meet such a violent end. What made the crime more disturbing was what wasn't there. Nothing in the home appeared to be stolen. The television, jewelry, electronics all untouched. There were no broken windows or kicked-in doors. Whoever had entered that home hadn't forced their way inside. They had been let in, or they had known exactly how to bypass security. Investigators quickly noticed something strange: the family's security system, which neighbors said Michael had installed and regularly used, had been manually disconnected hours before the murders. System logs confirmed it had been shut down by someone who knew the passcode. That single discovery narrowed the pool of suspects to those closest to the family. The weapon left behind added another layer of mystery. A handgun was placed beside Michael's body on the bed, wiped clean of fingerprints. At first glance, it suggested a possible murder-suicide, but forensic evidence didn't match the story. Gunshot residue tests revealed that Michael hadn't fired the weapon. He had been killed like the rest, with the same precision, the same single shot to the head. It became clear the killer had staged the scene to shift suspicion onto him. Imagine walking into a crime scene where everything looks purposeful, where even the smallest detail seems arranged. What would that tell you about the person responsible? Would you think they acted in a fit of rage, or would you believe they had carefully planned every step? Comment your thoughts below, because this crime scene was anything but chaotic. Forensic teams went to work examining fibers, prints, and trace evidence. They found faint boot prints near the back entrance of the home, though none matched Michael's shoes. More unsettling was the discovery that several documents in Michael's office had been removed. neatly labeled files that colleagues later confirmed were part of his ongoing projects were missing entirely. Investigators wondered if the murders had been tied to his work or if the missing files were a deliberate attempt to create confusion. The timeline of the murders also presented a puzzle. Neighbors reported hearing what sounded like faint pops around midnight, though no one thought to call the police at the time. A delivery driver passing through the neighborhood noted seeing a car parked a block away with its headlights off around the same hour. But when pressed, he couldn't identify the make or model, only that it wasn't a car he had seen there before. This fragment of testimony became one of the first leads detectives clung to as the investigation continued. The weight of grief fell heavily on Greenwood. Vigils were held in front yards, flowers piled on the Starbuck driveway, and the community struggled to make sense of a tragedy that felt impossible. For many, it was unthinkable that anyone could want to hurt Linda, Michael, or the children. Yet detectives knew that violence on this scale rarely came from strangers. Statistically, crimes like this almost always began close to home. Whoever had done this knew the house, knew the family's routines, and had the confidence to disconnect the security system without fear of being caught. It wasn't random. It was intimate. And as police pieced together the fragments, it became harder to deny that the killer was likely someone that Starbucks once trusted. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community. The question was no longer who would want to harm them, but rather which of the people closest to them could be capable of something so calculated and cold. As theories spread and speculation ran wild, investigators began uncovering secrets that pointed to betrayal, hidden debts, and relationships no one had imagined. Before we move on, think about this. If someone close to you had access to your home, your passcodes, your trust, could you ever imagine them turning it all into a weapon against you? The Starbucks never suspected it, and that trust would become their downfall. As detectives continued peeling back the layers of the Starbuck family's life, they stumbled upon a secret that changed the entire direction of the case. For weeks, investigators had been circling around the idea that the murders were too clean, too deliberate to have been random. They suspected someone close, but the motive remained unclear. That changed when they discovered a trail of phone records, bank statements, and late-night activity that pointed directly toward Michael's business partner, Ryan Collins. Ryan had been at Michael's side for over a decade, co-owner of the architecture firm that had put both of their names on Greenwood's skyline. He was charming, well-spoken, and had been welcomed into the Starbuck household countless times for dinners, birthdays, and family barbecues. To most, he was like an extended member of the family. But behind the polished exterior, Ryan had a crumbling secret. He was drowning in debt, specifically gambling debt, and was known to make reckless bets that spiraled far out of control. Those who knew him casually never suspected how deep the problem ran. The first real clue came when investigators uncovered a suspicious life insurance policy. Just months before the murders, Michael had signed papers naming Ryan as one of the beneficiaries of a large policy tied to the firm. On the surface, it was framed as a way to protect the business in case something happened to Michael, ensuring continuity for his partner. But to investigators, it looked like motive written in ink. The potential payout was massive, and for a man in financial ruin, it was enough to raise alarms. Digging further, detectives found evidence that Ryan had been in frequent contact with Linda. Dozens of phone calls, often late at night, suggested a relationship far more personal than professional. At first, the theory was that the two had confided in each other perhaps sharing frustrations about Michael. But soon, rumors turned into something more concrete. Friends later testified that Linda had expressed doubts about her marriage and admitted she felt closer to Ryan than to her husband. It was a revelation that reshaped the case. Because if Ryan had been having an affair with Linda, the possibility of jealousy, betrayal, and financial gain merged into a perfect storm. Police confronted Ryan, who denied everything, but the physical evidence began to pile up. A search of his home turned up a pair of gloves tucked away in his garage. On them, forensic experts detected traces of gunpowder residue. Even more damning, fibers consistent with the Starbuck family carpet were found clinging to the material. Though Ryan argued that he had visited the house many times before, the timing was impossible to ignore. Those gloves linked him directly to the crime scene in a way he couldn't explain. Witness statements added more weight. A neighbor had recalled seeing a car matching Ryan's parked near the Starbuck neighborhood around midnight, the very time neighbors had reported hearing faint popping sounds. Though the witness couldn't confirm the license plate, the description matched Ryan's vehicle almost exactly. The community that had once trusted him now turned suspicious. Parents whispered at school drop-offs, colleagues avoided eye contact, and people who had once shaken his hand now crossed the street to avoid him. How could someone so close to the family, so deeply embedded in their lives, betray them in such a horrific way? As detectives pieced the story together, the picture became darker. Ryan had motive money and love. He had opportunity access to the house and knowledge of their routines. And he had mincer weapon that matched the ballistics of the murders. What unsettled investigators most was the possibility that Linda may have known more than she admitted. While her death appeared to place her in the category of victim, her connection to Ryan raised difficult questions. Had she been part of a plan that went wrong? Was she supposed to be spared? Or had Ryan decided to eliminate her too, ensuring no one could tie him to the crime? These unanswered questions kept the case from being as clear-cut as prosecutors wanted. It was easier to believe Ryan acted alone out of desperation. But Linda's late-night calls, her strained marriage, and her connection to him created a lingering doubt as the story unfolded. The once perfect image of the Starbuck family shattered completely. The murders no longer looked like the work of a faceless intruder. They had become a story of betrayal and greed that touched every corner of the family's life. And as Ryan prepared to face trial, whispers of Linda's possible role continued to haunt everyone who followed the case. The discovery of Ryan's affair with Linda and his crushing financial troubles gave investigators the narrative they needed. But beneath it all, there was still something that didn't quite fit. The case was heading toward the courtroom, but the truth behind the Starbuck murders was about to become even more complicated. The trial of Ryan Collins began in 2008. 2 years after the murders that had shaken Greenwood and captured the attention of the world. The courthouse was packed each day, with journalists lining the steps outside and locals filling the benches inside, desperate to see the man accused of destroying the Starbuck family. Prosecutors painted Ryan as a man consumed by two powerful motives, money and desire. They laid out the evidence piece by piece, the life insurance policy that would have made him rich, the affair with Linda that suggested jealousy and obsession, the gunpowder residue on his gloves, and the neighbor's account of seeing his car near the house that night. To the prosecution, Ryan wasn't just guilty. He was the only person who could have committed the crime with such precision. Witnesses were called to describe his gambling debts, his reckless spending, and the pressure he was under in the weeks leading up to the murders. Former friends testified about his short temper when money was involved, while business associates described growing tension between him and Michael over financial mismanagement. Piece by piece, the story of a man pushed to the edge of desperation was laid before the jury. The prosecution's argument was simple. Ryan had killed the Starbucks to erase his debts, take control of the business, and be with Linda. But Ryan's defense told a different story. From the start, he denied pulling the trigger, insisting he was being framed as the fall guy for a crime he hadn't committed. Then came a twist that threw the entire courtroom into chaos. Ryan claimed Linda had orchestrated everything. According to him, she had grown tired of Michael and saw the life insurance money as a way out. He said she manipulated him with promises of a future together, convincing him to disconnect the cameras and help set the stage, but that she was the one who planned and carried out the murders. He claimed he never fired the gun, that his only crime was being blinded by his feelings for her and following her. Instructions, the revelation divided the courtroom. Some gasped in disbelief, unwilling to accept that Linda, the beloved school counselor and mother, could be involved in such horror. Others leaned forward, intrigued, considering whether there was truth in Ryan's desperate claims. After all, the evidence linking Linda to Ryan was undeniable: the late-night phone calls, the closeness that bordered on intimacy, and her growing dissatisfaction with Michael. The idea that she may have been more than a victim was unsettling. But it wasn't impossible. The prosecution dismissed Ryan's accusations as a last-ditch effort to save himself. They reminded the jury that Linda was found among the dead, killed in the same way as her children and husband. Why would she plan her own death? They argued that Ryan invented the story to cast doubt and escape responsibility. Still, some jurors were left with questions. If Ryan acted alone, why were key documents missing from Michael's office? Why had Linda confided in friends about feeling trapped in her marriage? Could Ryan's story hold fragments of truth buried under lies? In the end, the jury didn't believe him. After weeks of testimony and nearly 3 days of deliberation, Ryan Collins was found guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the verdict was read, the courtroom buzzed with a mix of relief and unease. Justice had been served in the eyes of the law. But the nagging questions about Linda's potential role lingered in whispers long after the trial ended. The Starbuck murders became a case study for law enforcement and criminology students across the country, not just because of the brutality, but because of the layers of deception, betrayal, and unanswered mysteries. The story wasn't simply about a man who killed his business partner and his family. It was about the darkness that can grow in the spaces between trust and suspicion, love and manipulation. The perfect family image had concealed financial troubles, marital discord, and dangerous entanglements that no one outside their home could have imagined, even now. Years later, people debate what really happened. Was Ryan truly the mastermind, driven by greed and debt, or was Linda more involved than anyone wanted to believe? Did he kill her to silence her, or was she simply another victim in his plan? These lingering doubts turned the case into something more than a closed file. It became a haunting mystery, the kind that people discuss in hushed tones long after the headlines fade. For the people of Greenwood, the memory of the Starbuck family is both painful and enduring. Vigils are still held in their honor. Plaques dedicated to the children sit in local schools, and Linda's former students occasionally speak of her kindness. Yet every tribute is shadowed by the knowledge of how their lives ended and by the suspicion that the full truth may never have been revealed. The trial concluded. The verdict was delivered, and the sentence ensured Ryan Collins would never walk free again. But the story of the Starbuck family murder endures because it reminds us of something deeply unsettling. The people we trust most are often the ones with the greatest power to hurt us. The Starbuck story is no longer just about a family lost, it's about the secrets that destroyed them, the betrayal that ensured their fate, and the chilling truth that perfection is often nothing more than an illusion.